Welcome, everybody, to our first in-person podcast during Twin Cities Startup Week 2024. I'm so excited to be joined by Tiffany Martin. She's a strategic and innovative leader at UnitedHealth with over a decade of experience in the healthcare industry. Tiffany has had multiple very successful, significant roles at UnitedHealth Group and Optum, where she's currently vice president and vice president of product and partnerships, overseeing product strategy and managing large-scale partnerships with over 25 million members to serve in the commercial business. Her leadership has been instrumental in driving strategic growth for high-profile partnerships, including collaborations with Apple and Peloton within the commercial, e-commerce, and virtual care product space. In addition to her role at UnitedHealth Group, Tiffany has led initiatives across product innovation, business strategy, and market growth, helping companies navigate complex landscape of commercial payers. Her work has consistently focused on aligning digital health technologies with payer needs and ensuring that solutions deliver measurable ROI. Tiffany's wealth of experience in strategy, growth products, and partnerships makes her the perfect expert for us to help dive into the challenges and opportunities within the commercial payer market. We look forward to hearing her insights today. And welcome, Tiffany.
Awesome. Super excited to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background or expand on certain things that I just mentioned and why you have such a wealth of knowledge within commercial payer strategy?
Sure. So I think you had mentioned I've been in, so first of all, super excited to be here. I have been part of the payer space for almost a decade. And I think specifically within the commercial business for about 6 years. So I've actually worked in both the pharmacy and medical benefit for the commercial payer. So starting off, I think 6 years ago, working on some of the cash card initiatives, think digital therapeutics and digital formulary, and then some of the clinical programs in that space. And then more recently moving into the medical side for affordability initiatives. And then I think most recently, wellness and incentive programs. So yeah, I have a kind of a lot of experience across different products and different areas. And so I'm super excited to kind of share hopefully insightful things about commercial space.
Absolutely. How are commercial payers different than Medicaid or Medicare payers?
So I'll state the obvious first, right? We have a different population, right? Those that are probably a little bit younger and then highly tech savvy, whereas in the Medicare, Medicaid space where you have elderly and kind of underserved populations. That's probably the most obvious. I think the second part is more of the business model. So the commercial space is really much more focused on selling to employers, right? Whereas so the employer and then with a different end user, right? So it's a B2B2C model, where oftentimes the employer and what they select may or may not be health plan benefits or offerings that necessarily the consumers may want to use, right? So that's kind of different. Whereas our Medicare and Medicaid business, well, our Medicare business is definitely our direct to consumer arm. We are directly selling to consumers, leveraging government funds. So that in and of itself kind of changes the stakeholders and the decision makers in the process on who sort of gets to who's going to be using the technology and what they think is attractive to this population.
Now I'm going to dive right into commercial payers that you've given us this awesome overview. What are they looking for from digital health technologies? What are their priorities that they're trying to solve for?
A really good question. Gosh, there are so many use cases for digital health across our entire ecosystem, right? I think specifically in the commercial space and where I kind of live, I think we're thinking a lot about just member engagement generally. And then how these kind of like digital health companies help us differentiate ourselves in the market, right? Because we are competing against other payers for the business of these employer contracts. So in a lot of ways, I think those are a couple of like key things that we're kind of thinking about. I would say like if you're working in the clinical space or affordability initiatives, you're probably going to find that they're also really looking at your clinical outcomes and efficacy and probably more like the cost effectiveness, so ROI.
Let's back up for a second. I'm curious, who are the biggest commercial payers in the US? And basically, who, if you can explain who you're trying to differentiate yourself from.
I think the ones that come off like are the top of my list are UnitedHealth Care, Cigna, Aetna, and probably the Blues. Those are, am I missing one?
No, I think you got it.
Okay.
And how have you seen those health plans differentiate themselves in the past using digital technologies? Does anything stand out?
So let's see. I think I'm noticing a lot more strategic partnerships with consumer brands as a way to kind of attract that like younger, more tech savvy, like swath of people in the population. So yeah, I think I'm starting to see a lot more of those really exciting opportunities. I think in particular, I think United did some cool things with like Peloton, did some cool things with Apple, with the Apple Watch. And I think Aetna has done things like that in the past. And then they're also starting to kind of get more into like health and wellness, right? So you're starting to see them offer things like Gym Pass and other kind of like cool benefits that I think employees of these
would
benefits would want.
What I'm noticing and something that I talk to my clients a lot about is focus on your customer's customer. And so in this case, if we focus on Apple as the employer, FedEx as the employer, Walmart as the employer, what are the things that they're looking for incorporating in order for them to attract top talent?
Yeah.
And so that's where I think your comment around partnering with big recognizable consumer brands is so critical and important, and it makes sense, is because they want to attract that top talent by providing these type of high-end benefits to their employee base.
100%. That's 100%.
And so what are some metrics you're trying to impact when you're forging these partnerships? So attraction of new talent. So not just the metrics for you as a health plan, but your customers' metrics, right? So what are these employers looking to impact? Attraction of new talent, potentially retention of talent. What are some other ones?
I think the biggest other one, I think this is again, maybe obvious to some, but it's really cost containment, right? Because like healthcare spend is so high at this point. And I think they're trying to figure out how do we continue to add to the benefit in a way that like ultimately attracts this talent, maintains this talent as part of our broader, like our broader sort of people strategy. Yet at the same time, like how do we contain costs in a way that is manageable for our bottom line business, right? So that's where it's like striking a balance, because ultimately adding a lot of extra like bells and whistles just adds more cost to serve, right? And more for the employers to bear. So I think those are a few things that I feel like it's a constant balance whenever we're talking about this.
Yeah. One of the things that has stood out to me from our previous conversations is you mentioned that don't talk to me about savings and ROI, and most payers that I approach with digital health solutions and say, hey, this is our ROI, they literally slash it in half.
Yeah.
And so, what you've made very clear, and it was been very interesting to me, is don't talk to me about the ROI, talk to me about the engagement. How are you actually going to engage folks so that you can deliver the clinical savings?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
I mean, I think you hit it on the head, right? Like ultimately, I feel like as a recipient of a lot of pitches right now, I think a lot of digital health companies and their go-to-market strategy is around long-term affordability savings, right?
Mhm.
And so it just happens to be in a different clinical vertical, right? But it's the same sort of storyline. And so, but I think for me, it's like the biggest problem that we have in the commercial space is like how do you engage members so that you can realize those savings? Because at the end of the day, we could have the best solution. Like
Mhm.
you could have created like the most amazing solution that no like members don't use,
No one uses.
right?
Yeah.
So then what's your marketing communication strategy, right?
Mhm.
How do you get members to actually care about the thing that you're trying to
Bring to
create,
market.
yeah, bring to
Mhm.
market
Mhm.
to get them to to engage in. So that continues to be probably the biggest problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. You mentioned that you see a lot of pitches. I'm very curious. One, how do digital health tech founders find you? And are others like you that are in other health plans? And what's the appropriate way to reach out to someone who is in a role of partnerships? And then two, I would love for you to expand on what do you look for? What grabs your attention right away? And you're like, yes, this is a company I want to work with. And I want to bring up to my leadership. And yeah.
Great questions. I think these days, most people, I feel like if they're cold outreaching,
Mhm.
it's typically through LinkedIn. And you'd be surprised, I think, how often people do respond. Like
Mm.
we have also cold outreach to a number of different like digital health companies that we're interested in and are on our target list. And have gotten a lot of really good engagement from that and
Mhm.
initial conversations. I think the other one is like work your relationships like within, right? As if you're starting cold, right? That's okay because finding somebody that knows how to navigate the huge matrix that, oftentimes these big payers are, like
Mhm.
will be helpful in getting you to the right people. And so oftentimes I'm either getting approached through LinkedIn or my leader knows somebody and they're just like sending these digital health companies along for my evaluation, right? Or
Mhm.
like maybe even somebody like some of my peer group. So again, work those relationships, find that internal network to kind of help you along. I would say that specifically the people that I feel like really are connectors in the organization tend to be like the product function, just because we're working across all the different functional support arms, right? So it's like we're working with clinical leadership, we're working with finance, we're working with
Mhm.
marketing and whatnot. But the product team is often driving the strategy and the growth strategy and working with leadership to kind of surface, which digital health vendors are probably the
Yeah.
next.
How does the payer develop their target list? Well, you mentioned having your own target list and doing your own outreach. So how does that work?
That's also a really good question. Demi, you just ask all the good questions. I think this depends on the initiative, right? Like with every initiative, there is a big problem to solve, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes you're in the clinical space, right? And they're looking across the different verticals that are the high spend verticals, and trying to figure out how we can operate as a value lever for our employers, right? In a
Mhm.
more consultative way. And those, you start to identify areas that are really, really expensive. And then you're starting to go after a broader sort of strategy around that, like affordability space. I think if you're talking about like digital kind of,
Mhm.
right now, it really is about the digital funnel. And like as you're looking for opportunities, as we're collecting more data and becoming more mature in this space, we
Mhm.
are looking for where the drop-offs are within that digital funnel and trying to figure out, right, like how do you solve for that problem? And I think we are trying to think really outside of the box at this point on like how we can solve for those problems. Um, I think there are a lot of ways that like we've seen that have like been a little lackluster over the last decade or so. And I think
Mhm.
we're trying to figure out how do we change that
Mhm.
so that we are getting the throughput that we want to see in the digital health and
Got
the
it.
digital funnel.
Do conferences play a role in this? And which ones are ones that you found very valuable to use in your target list creation, or
Oh, good call.
are there other strategies? Do you partner with accelerators, for example, or do you have your own? How does that fit into creating a target list?
I love that you bring this up because conferences are huge. In fact, we're sending a handful of people to health. So health is one of the biggest, I think, digital health conferences, like I think annually,
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we send a host of people there, and there's like an opportunity for us. We have, a booth, and oftentimes we have our own target list, and we're going out to meet vendors there. But oftentimes vendors are also reaching out to us, like digital health partners, and they're asking if we're going to be there, so we can again start that relationship together.
Yeah. Do you ever, so one thing I've noticed, I've been going to health for now 6 years, I think it's been in existence. And so I've gone every single year, and they have this payer provider lounge where they facilitate kind of like speed dating between the purchasers and the buyers of these digital technologies with the startups. Have you ever been a part of that, and has that been fruitful?
I've definitely been part of that. My team has been a part of that historically. And I think in the last year, well, not last year, but the year before, I think there's been about 6 to 12 partnerships that have come through that health track.
That's amazing.
It's pretty amazing. And as we look at our pipeline, it continues to be a large portion. We're also working with kind of different venture capital and incubator groups, right? Because they're obviously a source for the up and coming sort of digital health companies. And so we're often working with their portfolio managers to kind of understand where their synergies, where is their good fit. And they're often kind of so it's kind of like a constant sync that we're doing, so that we're always trying to we can keep a pulse on the market, but also be at the edge of things.
Yeah, you're monitoring who's investing in what, and that makes sense. And I'm sure the investors want to know from you, what are your strategic priorities? What solutions are you looking for, so they can identify and find and invest in those solutions that can solve those problems.
Definitely, it's definitely very symbiotic.
Yeah, good. Are there any misconceptions that digital health companies need to be aware of when approaching commercial payers?
Misconceptions. Yes, I think there are a few, and they kind of contradict each other.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I guess I would say one is that I feel like oftentimes I feel like payers, there's a thought that from digital health companies that payers don't put a lot into marketing and promotion, and that they won't expect after you start to partner with them for you to actually continue in that marketing and promotion. But like I said, member engagement is so critical at this point that we have huge expectations of digital health companies to be pushing on their end as much as we're pushing on our end, right? So that we're kind of always the top of mind for our members. So I think that's one of them. And then I think the other is
there a counter, just before you jump to the next point, is there a counter pull with so much regulation in the space, right? You can only do so much marketing, and it has to fit certain formats, and it has to be approved. How does that work? Does your leadership work with the digital health company to try to align on marketing objectives and schedules and all of that? How does that process work?
Marketing is a huge work stream every time we have a partnership. And yes, there's a lot of, like we said, legal and regulatory barriers around what we are able to market, who we're able to market to, right? And so oftentimes we will come up with kind of a broader marketing strategy and comm strategy, and then deep dive into each specific sort of creative deliverable, and how we want to position things, and really kind of go back and forth. It's very much a collaborative effort between our both sets of legal and marketing teams.
Great. Good to know. Good to know.
So that can be actually it can be a conduit, but also a potential barrier.
Mhm.
And so I think as you guys think about working with like digital health companies, it's super important that like you have a strong marketing entity,
Mhm.
being able to drive and lead in that space because it will become a big element.
Problem. I'm curious, what are other things that could potentially become a barrier? One that we run up against often with my digital health tech clients is because it's tech, being put on a large payer's tech work stream. We have to do one more integration. One, what can you say about technology integrations? And then two, is there other items as well that could be potentially barriers for digital health tech integration?
Yes, I think the one that comes up a lot these days is probably security. Security and data, right? Protection. So, as you can imagine, there's just a lot of heightened security around data.
PHI.
Yeah, protection at this point. And so if you can, as you're working with payers, like realize that we have increased the requirements around security, before integration. So if you can get ahead and be like high trust or SOC 2 certified, you're going to be way ahead of the game. And I think that getting high trust certified is like a 18 to 24 months sort of
Timeline.
Yeah. So getting ahead of that has really helped us integrate faster with our partners. Or at least getting on a path where like you can show that you're going to have all the requirements checked. Is also going to move things along. So the security element is big. I think another one is accessibility, and then AI, ML, right? Like
Okay.
there's a lot more requirements around getting approved in that particular space before proceeding to even talking about integration. So again, like make that like the more you know up front about what they need, the better prepared you can be to move this along faster.
Have you ever seen deals fall apart, like post signature, post we're going to run a pilot because of tech requirements or security requirements not being met?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think in the last like year especially, security is almost like a go, no go,
Okay.
right? Like it's like if you cannot meet our security requirements because we have to protect our patient data, or member data above all other things, like it's just not even, there's no path forward.
Got it. One other big elephant in the room is ROI. And so I want to spend some time talking about ROI as a requirement for go, no go. What are your thoughts on ROI? Does a startup have to have that proven? Are there certain steps if you've never piloted your solution, do you even start talking to a United or an Anthem or Cigna, or do you want to work with a smaller health plan to get some numbers before you can even pitch a larger payer? But just in general, what are your thoughts on ROI? What are the biggest opportunities or barriers?
Well, ROI plays a really crucial role in basically getting like the decision-making process in general and getting kind of greenlit. Okay, so like if you don't already have ROI data, that's okay. I would still start the conversation early to start understanding. I think my general approach and my general advice is seek to understand the problem they're solving for, so you can understand what ROI really means, because there's a dollar number, right? There are the like tangible dollars, but then there's a lot of intangible things as well, especially in the commercial space. And you really want to understand how you can dovetail into either their broader solution or how you can be the solution for that problem. So I'd have those conversations early. And you have to kind of start somewhere, right? So like at some point, if you start to have those conversations and use it as an opportunity for like a discussion rather than like a formal pitch, like you can shape your business or your go-to-market strategy and business model in a way that may actually play a little bit more in your favor, right? To the needs of the organization. And then like I often find that those discussions lead to pilot opportunities, right?
Nice.
And so if you maintain flexibility in pricing, if you maintain flexibility in kind of your broader like business strategy and go-to-market strategy, I think you will find it to be potentially fruitful. I do find sometimes that like startups that may come in too fully baked without having tested or like
Mhm.
gotten a pulse from like the like the client or are often have probably spent a lot of time.
And on the product, maybe
Yeah, like
rather than,
the business,
yeah,
and the business need.
yeah.
And I've seen that many a time where
Mhm.
like a couple of years goes through building out this technology that payers aren't gonna
Purchase.
purchase.
Yeah. Can we unpack a little bit the hard and soft benefits? Can you give us some examples in addition to ROI? What are some hard benefits that you look for? And then what are soft benefits that you potentially look for?
Yeah, so I think like hard benefits is like it's like the numbers, right? And so we're
Mhm.
talking about affordability, cost savings, right?
Mhm.
Cost efficiency, like cost takeout when it comes to like making our operations a little bit more efficient, right? So
Mhm.
those kind of things we can quantify. Whereas like when I talk about intangible, there may be a broader strategy again around our digital funnel that is more around the volume of engagement, right? So click rates that you're seeing, click through
Mhm.
rates, and whatnot. And oftentimes like, sometimes you have to invest in those intangible benefits to see the tangible benefits in the long run, right? So I want to say there was like somebody had mentioned this to me, and now that I'm being reported, I'm like, maybe I should like
Right.
not. But somebody had shared with me that I think like Facebook had their whole model in the beginning was just to drive people to their platform, and then
Mhm.
over time figure out how to monetize it, right? So create a captive audience
Mhm.
first, and then figure out how to monetize it later. So that's
Yeah.
why it's like sometimes the intangible benefits are going to be inherently necessary to the broader strategy to find more like tangible benefits.
Yeah. Is there specific numbers that you look for in terms of engagement? Is there specific numbers that you look for in terms of ROI or even NPS? I know personally, I've worked on a lot of solutions that the payer would simply establish the partnerships because the technology has such a high NPS. And for whatever reason, and we know not people don't really like their payers, especially when it comes to paying for benefits, right? And so some historically have very low NPS and they try to do whatever they can to boost that score. So what numbers should founders target? Like if you can't deliver on a 30%, ROI, or if you can't deliver on 50% engagement, is there a cutoff, I guess, for any of those parameters?
I don't think that there is like a threshold per se, but I can tell you that like um based on what I've seen
Mhm.
in like the digital health space, I think what piques my interest or like it starts to pique my interest is when we're above a 30% member engagement rate
Mhm.
for especially clinical programs. I
Mhm.
find that to be kind of interesting. Um, like this is my perspective only, right?
Right.
Like 30% is starting to really pique my interest. And then I would say for NPS, what is, I mean, I think like above 80 is typically, at least for a consumer brand, typically is really good.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you guys got to balance that as like digital health founders with the right business model, right? Because
Right.
because I think Peloton's a good case in point, right? Like
Yeah.
really strong like
Brand
brand
recognition.
recognition and
Mhm.
experience and all of that. But is it a viable business model?
Mhm.
Right. And so like I think you guys have to balance that a little bit.
Yeah. Speaking of Peloton, do you want to share some examples of successful partnerships or when you've deployed digital health technologies and how did you measure success?
Hmm. So
And you don't have to give us, if it's confidential, you don't have to give us the name of the company, but maybe just a little bit about what they do and why was their solution so valuable to the payer?
So I think I can give you an example of a couple of them, like a couple of digital health partners that I feel like have really kind of been able to get into the commercial market.
Mhm.
And I kind of followed them from like the beginning of their journey. So like I think the first one that comes to mind is probably Virta.
Verda.
So I
Mhm.
think 6 years ago I did my first pilot with Virta. Um,
And are they a diabetes solution?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they had a really interesting sort of go to market, right? Like their messaging and positioning was around reversing diabetes.
Mhm.
And so it really captivated the audience really quickly, right? Like
Mhm.
the member was like, oh yeah, if we can reverse my diabetes, like I definitely want to engage in this, right? And so they were
But it also same with the payer, right? If you can tell me that you're reversing or curing a condition as a payer, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna have to pay for all these pharmaceuticals to manage your condition because I'm gonna eradicate it. I'm gonna cure it. So from a payer cost equation too, I would be captivated,
I'd be
right?
curious
Yeah.
definitely at least to hear the pitch,
Yeah.
right? Like, tell me more. So they, I think, really did a good job of kind of like working their internal network. And I say
Mhm.
that's because like every conversation I would get into around clinical programs, it felt like we're constantly just bringing up the example of Verta, you
Mhm.
know? And again, sometimes if you're just, again, talking to a number of different people in the organization in the matrix, they're all talking to each other. And if
Mhm.
you can be top of mind, it actually just helps you
Get to that next
connect.
level, next conversation.
Exactly, exactly. And so all of a sudden, Verta went from we're just like starting out to everybody like it felt like three different areas of the organization was trying to do a pilot.
Mhm.
And so it was, yeah, I think they are definitely an example of a success story at
Mhm.
this point.
Are there any emerging trends that you're keeping an eye on right now? One that comes to mind is integrative therapy. And I can expand on that. A lot of us talk about the US health system being a sick care system.
Mm.
And so only when there's an issue that needs to be treated, then do we come in. And so there's this push and movement to value-based care. And as a result of that, toward prevention. But is that even tangible and real yet? Are payers even, thinking about that? And if so, are there any conversations around integrative therapies or holistic therapies and bringing some digital solutions to help advance the movement toward value-based care?
Oh, for sure. Like there's definitely a lot of that going on. We're definitely looking kind of on the spectrum of that holistic health and wellness space, right? I think there was like a company you brought to me actually not too long ago. I think and another peer of mine is kind of like taking this on, but
Yeah,
I think it was like horticulture therapy or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
And it was just so interesting how you can kind of expand into that like
yeah.
space.
I mean, art therapy, there is, yeah, horticulture therapy is an example of integrative therapy.
Integrated therapy. Yeah.
And actually some cultures around the world have been doing these type of therapies for hundreds of years. And we're just now starting to discover them and put them to use here in the US. So I like that movement to integrative therapy, I guess personally.
Yeah, that one's super interesting. I think another one that's really interesting to me is like precision medicine and like genomics, right? That's like another trend. Obviously, I think the one that like we don't talk about a lot, but it's actually one of the biggest problems to solve for is probably interoperability with like healthcare systems, right? We're going to be constantly pushing for more integration between the payer and the provider and wanting more data and such, right? But like I think there is a lot of interoperability issues, and that's probably arguably one of the biggest opportunities, I think. I think other trends, um, I'm sure this one is not going to be a surprise, is like AI, data analytics, right? Being a great use case for like personalized care, risk stratification, claims processing, fraud detection, all that.
Anything that can help the payer sort of target a specific population and more effectively, again, engage those members and prove out the outcomes for that population. That makes sense. Okay, well, I'm curious, what advice do you have to the CEOs that want to introduce their solutions into the commercial payer business? Do you have any key takeaways or things that they should do when approaching a commercial payer leader?
Yeah, I think I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier already, but like I think I would say, when you're entering the commercial payer market, seek to understand first, right, the unique challenges, and those priorities the payers have that's going to be really critical to success. Demonstrating value and then fostering strong partnerships. I think those are probably the three big things. So I think when I'm trying to understand how my solution can fit, right, I'm always trying to understand the business model first, right? Because that will kind of shape how you understand the economics and the business itself. I would probably spend some time differentiating your technology, right? Because a lot of the technologies I see these days are kind of like they feel a little bit like enabling capabilities, but like that can be somewhat table stakes over time. So what are you doing to kind of differentiate and then focus on think a lot about that integration, scalability, and security element, right? And how you can kind of fit within the payer's existing sort of workflows. Continue to prioritize member engagement. Again, that's a big topic for us, both initial and long-term sort of engagement, and then sort of be prepared for long deal cycles. Okay.
How much are we talking?
I mean, it can be like 18 months, right? Like 18 months for these kind of deal cycles. And so it maintain flexibility with your payment models, right? Be open to working with the payer a little bit more on that. So
yeah. And when it comes to pilot pricing is very different than when you become a vendor. And so just being clear to expect some flexibility in your pricing models. Wonderful. If as a CEO, where should one go to find commercial payer info and or information about the payer priorities?
This is where I stress again, start to network and build those relationships, because a lot of the things that are tip top of commercial payer, like their minds, are not going to be published out there, right? Like if some of these things are like big strategic initiatives that are occurring. So definitely start to have those conversations internally, and I think you'll start to see where things are trending, because I think you'll see where things are trending.
Yeah. It's important though not to burn those connections, and I highly recommend working with someone like Akros, who is staying on top of all these trends and strategic initiatives to help you navigate a payer more expertly. I do want to open up for audience questions and see if you guys have any questions about commercial payers. Any questions? Oh, sure. We have an audience question.
So we were talking a little bit about like ROI, and I'm wondering what the difference, how you think about ROI versus like outcomes for an early startup. So
the question is, what is the difference between ROI and early outcomes for a startup?
Well, outcomes I think are like an indicate, like it kind of feeds into the ROI calculation, right? So when I know with ROI, ultimately, that takes kind of population level data, right, to really kind of arrive at. So sometimes the outcome itself is going to be sufficient and like enough of an indicator for me that there might be enough potential, right?
Yeah. Any other questions?
Just the general commercial, like I'm from the medical side, so I'm thinking of commercial, I'm thinking maybe value-based care isn't as prevalent with the appetite of my perspective isn't as prevalent there. Have you seen changes in that, or it's still, fee for service type model generally?
The question is whether the predominant model in the commercial payer space is fee for service, and or is there shifts toward value-based care, and what does that look like?
I think value-based care continues to be a huge priority for commercial. I think it's like, at least based on what I've seen, a lot of that is trying to is kind of occurring in the network space, right? And
Mhm.
trying to drive provider adoption of those kind of value-based care contracts. So another way we think about, or another way to talk about value-based care that you might hear is total cost of care,
Mhm.
right? And so total cost of care within our clinical programs and those affordability initiatives still continue to be a priority for the organization. I think, I think I just found this like a little bit earlier that these affordability initiatives, this total cost of care and whatnot, like they're all kind of based around, like the crux of it is really member engagement, right? Because we need the members to engage in order for us to realize a lot of these affordability savings. And so a lot of the commercial priorities right now, I feel like at least it's really about the consumer and thinking about how to better engage the consumer within our ecosystem so that we can get downstream affordability, right? Create a captive audience now and then figure out how to drive them towards to build that trust, build that relationship, and then start driving them towards better decision.
I have one question that just popped into my mind. I have seen a trend for payers to create these libraries of digital solutions that then they make available to their employer contracts, sort of like a plug and play model. Is that something that you would recommend, or how does one even navigate to get on the list of something like this? I think United's is called UHC Hub. And how does a CEO of a digital health solution get on the list? Not to put you on the spot, but putting you on the spot.
That's a great question. Again, I would definitely lean on those relationships, tap into your network, right?
Mhm.
Like, Akros is great, and I know a lot of the people that are probably driving some of these
Yep.
initiatives, and so I think you would be like a great person to like kind of be a conduit to that
Mhm.
conversation. Really tap into the internal network. I want to say that a lot of payers do work through the internal sort of relationships. So
Yeah.
build those up.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You talked, or you just kind of noted high spend verticals. And we talked a little bit about some themes. I'm wondering if substance use disorder,
Mhm.
where it, obviously it's a national
Yeah,
trend.
yeah.
Wondering how, where is that coming up for you guys? How are you thinking about it? Is digital health starting to fall more into that arena versus kind of more of the standard inpatient treatment centers? I know there's some big solutions out there. I'm just kind of curious to flow back.
The question is around substance use disorder and how much of a priority is substance use disorder for commercial payers, and what are strategies that commercial payers are deploying in the space?
So I can speak kind of broadly to this, like in that I know mental health and mental and behavioral health continue to be one of the biggest priorities for the commercial business. We hear, and mainly because employers are really interested in this space, right? Finding more solutions for their base. For substance, so I think broadly, yes. I think substance use, so I had worked kind of in the behavioral health space before, and I had worked on substance use kind of disorder initiatives. And I can say that your target market will probably be more Medicaid.
Mhm.
That is probably the biggest area about if that is your particular
Mhm.
like space.
And I'm going to
Yeah.
say, from my personal experience, having been a payer Medicaid leader, we had, whole care pathway dedicated to substance use disorder. And that touched not just, it touched children, it touched mothers, it touched various populations within the Medicaid population. When we say Medicaid, Medicaid is multiple populations. And so, but having a substance use strategy was critical to our ability to land contracts with various states to manage their populations. It was huge to our ability to manage clinical spend. So it's definitely a priority. Yeah. Well, with that, Tiffany, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of your experience and insights with us. And I hope that all of you founders out there are finding this insightful and it's helping you accelerate your time to market. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.